Hey y'all, it's Poseidon. Some of you may know, but for those of you who don't know, I'm going to be working on creating a top 100 list of the best Mortal Kombat 1 players in the competitive scene. And I just wanted to talk in this video about some of the criteria that's going to go into this and let it be like a preface to the actual list that's going to come out around mid-January. I want to make sure that I do my due diligence and kind of wanted to just talk about, why I wanted to do this and what it can mean for the scene and the criteria that's going to go into making this. So first things first, I think this is going to be good for the competitive scene because I think it adds some legitimacy to results. So obviously I'm going to be taking, results from competitive gameplay. So essentially what makes something competitive is essentially it being in some sort of organized format, ideally in a bracket, ideally in a double elimination bracket that essentially organized by a content creator or tournament organizer. If someone like Sonic Fox plays Ninja Killer in a first to 10 and streams it, something like that would not be considered towards this list. The results of that would not be considered in the slightest towards something like this. It has to be in a competitive setting in a tournament, and ideally, honestly, offline tournaments, especially like pro comp events, for example, are some of the biggest and will have the most weight when considering who is going to make this list. So events like ECT or UFA, even big events like DreamHack or Vianality, those events will be taken into consideration and weigh heavily into the list of players. So if people get together, if you beat someone in Combat League, or if you run like a beef set with someone, that is not going to be considered. So if you're someone who doesn't play competitively, you're not someone who is going to be considered for the list. And so this is essentially a way to create a ranking within Mortal Kombat, but it's not going to be exactly like the top 100. Like there definitely is someone who is sitting on their couch playing Combat League and doesn't enter tournaments who potentially could be a top 100 player, but we would have no way of knowing that or getting that data and being able to articulate it in a way that it made sense to add that. It's like saying who's the MVP, who's the best player, not MVP, but who's the best player of football, who's the best quarterback in the world, and we're saying, oh, it's potentially some guy on his couch. It's not Patrick Mahomes. It's some guy on his couch. Like, you can't really compare that, you know what I mean? Like, it's obviously Patrick Mahomes or this year maybe someone else. So that's essentially a big thing that's going to be considered into how we're going to gather the data for this top 100 list. Essentially, another thing that's going to go into it is there are big online events such as the Coliseum and Rips Arena, but what they do, and those obviously are going to have to be considered in some way to the ranking because they're just too big and very legitimate events to not consider them even at least slightly towards a potential ranking, because it's definitely a place where a lot of people go to compete. But there is an individual format of like just playing individual matches. In the Coliseum, you play essentially trying to get into the top 8, and then there's a top 8 bracket, at least until the final finale. And Rips Arena is a very similar way, only Rips Arena is like you play like one match a day. And you play that match, and you essentially are in a ranking, and if you finish in the top 16, then you're in the tournament. Those matches beforehand it's very hard to find a lot of legitimacy in those. So those really won't be considered. Not only is it a lot of data to go through, it would be hard to very articulate that. Not doing getting your results in a bracket format does decrease the legitimacy of them a little bit. Like, people lose to players who are worse than them all the time. People beat players who are better than them all the time. I do that all the time. I beat players who are better than me a lot. Not to say like, oh, they're better, but like I can realize, hey, they're better than me, but I beat them in this particular set. And when it's just kind of like a random throw in there, randomized situation, and let me throw this analogy out there. When in the 2022 NFL football season, the Indianapolis Colts week 3 played the Kansas City Chiefs and beat them. The Colts beat the Chiefs. The Colts went on to be, I think, 14 or no, 4-12-1, won 4 games all season. The Chiefs, I'm pretty sure, went 14-3 or 13-4, and went on to win the Super Bowl. Because, the Colts, in that particular week were good enough to beat the Chiefs, but that was, they randomly were selected and maybe caught them on a bad week, and they didn't meet them in the playoffs and were able to take them out in a situation where there was a lot on the line. This kind of beat them in a week where, at the grand scheme, didn't really matter. The Colts season was still trash. The Kansas City Chiefs still went on to win the Super Bowl. It didn't really affect much. So it's hard to consider when it's just kind of thrown together, kind of like a combat league match, for example. It's kind of hard to draw a lot of legitimacy from that compared to it being in a bracket format. But the brackets, the top 8s, even if you just qualified for it, or the actual brackets that happen within Rips Arena or Coliseum, events like that, will definitely be considered, be heavily considered. Just kind of wanted to explain that. Another big thing that's going to go into this is who you beat has a lot more to say about how good you are than the placements that you get. So I just want to throw a situation at you that actually happened at DreamHack. Deadly Rebel and Abyss both got 9th place at the tournament. Both really, really good results, both really, really good players. However, how they got there and the players they had to beat were vastly different. So let's play out these scenarios. We'll go look at Rebel. Rebel beat Crispy Biscuit. Crispy Biscuit is probably a really good player. He made it there. However, that is where Ninja Killa was supposed to be, but Ninja Killa didn't go to the tournament, or he at least didn't play in it. So Rebel had a bit of an easier path. So he beat Crispy Biscuit, and then lost to Beyond Toxin, and then lost to Just Nasty. Of course, very, very insanely strong players. But he beat Crispy Biscuit, and then we'll go back and look at his pool. We'll see who we had to beat, like Spooter. That's not the Spooter, that's a different one. I never heard of this guy before. They could be good players. Beat Zentai. Zentai is a very good player, so that is definitely a notable win. But let's compare it to Abyss, who got the same exact placement. Let's see who Abyss had to play to get there. So he loses to Big Daddy G, and then he beats Zentai, who Rebel also beats Full Auto, and then loses to Gambler. And then we'll see in his pool who else he had to play. So he had to play Forever King, beat Forever King, the Real Fox, and that's someone I've really heard of before, and then also beats Too Easy. So he beat Forever King, Too Easy, Full Auto, and Zentai to get 9th place, when Rebel beat, I don't want to talk down about any players, but any person who would be considered for the top 100 list, the only player that he beat who's kind of on that radar is Zentai. And then that's really his only big win to get to this point. Even though they both got 9th place at DreamHack Atlanta, someone like Abyss has a lot more credibility to be a higher ranking on the top 100 list because of the players that he beat and the run that he had, even though he ran and got the same exact place that Rebel did. So placements are, of course, important, but who you beat and how your sets go individually in these brackets weighs heavier than just the placement that you get, if that makes sense. So yeah, that is honestly a big part of it. Like I said, this list is going to be coming in mid-January. I said I want to do my due diligence. I want to make sure that I look at all the facts, compile them, make sure everything makes sense. Another big thing I want to talk about, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, is that I am the only one who's working on this list. I did reach out and asked, I put it out like, hey, I'm going to be making this list. And nobody really was interested in helping, and that's fine. I'm not upset or sad about it. I do hope in the future, like I said, if we're able to do this on like a semi-yearly basis, so every 6 months do a summer ranking and a winter ranking, I can in the future get more help. Because the thing is, when it's just me making the list, it's hard to not have some bias, because the way I have to do like these rankings is, in a way, I have to judge someone's skill, and it can't just be 100% based off the results that I have for this game. For example, the Chilean twins, Scorpion, Prox, and Nicolas, are insanely strong players. I only have seen, and I'm sure there's more information out there, so I'll be able to look into that more, but only seeing their result in the pro comp event that they played in, which was online, solely strict to their region, which didn't have a ton of top players. Still very, very good talent, but not something like a DreamHack Atlanta, an ECT, a UFA, a Vianality, even a CEO Taku. So it's hard to be like, based off this tournament alone, and we withdraw anything they did in 11 or any things they've done in the stream, which don't really count towards this. It's hard to give them the ranking that they probably deserve. So in a way, I do have to use a little bit of just judgment of how good do I think they are, because it wouldn't be fair to rank them very, very lowly just because that's the only data I have of them, even though I know there's more. So that's why it's helpful to have more than one person work on this, because then we can kind of come together with more of a judgment and compile the facts and be like, hey, this is my list. This is what I think that the top 100 should be. And then we kind of look and compare, or they can look at mine and be like, I don't know about this. What about these results? Why is this worth more than that? So that's definitely something that people should consider when over this list. I am only one person working on this. Like I said, it's fine. It is more of a passion project at this point, and I hope that if people enjoy this, that we have more people that want to work on it in the future. Another thing, and a big reason I wanted to make this, and I'm not 100% sure if I touched on this already, is that it gives more legitimacy to events, to competing, gives something for people to strive for. Like, I'm going to be a top 100 Mortal Kombat 1 player in the world, or just NRS player. And it also will give something like sponsorships, something to look at, something concrete and physical to be like, okay, this is the 15th best player in the world, or at least in terms of competitively. And that way they can be like, okay, like, I want to, sponsor this player, give them, X amount of money, help them get to more events, because we see how good they are, and we see that they actually have a lot of value in their skill at the game, and that, essentially opens the door for potentially more sponsorship opportunities, which thus helps the scene. So, I hope, based off of what I said, it makes sense why I'm making the list. People are, potentially looking forward to it. And maybe in the future, if this gets traction, it could be something that people want to help with more in the future. Like I said, I'm completely fine with doing this. Said it's completely a passion project. It is a lot of work, and I really want to make sure this is a legitimate thing, that I'm not just throwing numbers out there and being like, I think this player is better than the other one. This isn't going to be an opinion piece. This is going to be based off the data and essentially the information that I have available to me. So yeah, that's basically it. And I hope you guys look forward to the list. It's gonna be dropping, I said, mid-January. I plan on making like a video of it, and then potentially dropping the list in some sort of format. I really need to figure out where I can drop it, because I really don't have like a website or anything. Maybe I will make something like that. If I can, we'll see. But the list will be made by mid-January, and we'll hopefully have an announcement out showing the rankings off. But yep, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Preface to the top 100 rankings for Mortal Kombat 1. And if you haven't already, please drop a sub, because it helps. And the more this channel grows, the more I can actually, do with, this, essentially. Because I'm not trying to brag or anything like that, but I am essentially probably one of, if not the most in tune with the state of the competitive scene in terms of how good players are. And that's not necessarily like, I'm not like bragging, like that's not even something to brag about. Like, that's not even impressive. That's not even like a cool thing. Like, you'd be doing anything with your life, but you were the most in tune with how the state of the Mortal Kombat 1 competitive scene is. Like, is there something more worthless than that? So, but thank you guys so much. Like I said, dropping a sub will help me do more of this, essentially, and will help me produce more and do more stuff for the Mortal Kombat 1 scene, because that's what I look to do. I want to help grow this. So, thank you so much, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.